Good morning, everybody. I welcome everyone to the meeting of this licensing subcommittee taking place from the Walton Suite, Winchester Guildhall. The time is 10 a.m. My name is Councillor Brian Laming, one of the committee members of this particular licensing subcommittee. The meeting, with the exception of determining the decision, is being live streamed and recorded to the council's YouTube channel. Subtitles are available and advice on how to turn this on is set out on our website. Please can everybody ensure that their mobiles are silent or switched off in its entirety. That includes me. There'll be a short fire alarm test at approximately 10:15 this morning, when there will be a brief pause in the proceeding. Please remain seated. In the unlikely event that it is necessary to evacuate the building for a genuine emergency, the fire alarm will sound continuously. Then please follow all the instructions given to you by our team. Now, moving to the agenda, to confirm the chairperson for the meeting.
Happy to confirm you, Councillor Laming.
Thank you.
Happy to second it.
Okay. In the interest of disclosure, do members or officers have any interest that they wish to declare? Thank you. The application for the new premises licence at Brooklands Farm, Botley Road, Bishop's Waltham, Southampton, Hampshire, SO32 1DR, report number LR 592. The hearings regulations require that the hearing should take the form of a discussion led by the subcommittee, and that cross-examination will not normally be allowed. We will follow the adopted procedure for these hearings, which is set out on the reverse of the agenda paper. Each party will be allowed equal maximum time to exercise their rights at the hearing. I will exercise my discretion to allow additional time if necessary, taking into account the requirement to show all parties equal maximum time. Only those points contained within the written representation, the report and the supplementary documents can be raised. No new evidence can be considered except with the agreement of all parties. I'd like to introduce, I have Councillor Morris on my left and Councillor Warwick on my right. Could I ask the officers and representatives around the table to introduce themselves, please? Yeah.
My name is Laura James and I am the licensing and litigation solicitor for Winchester City Council. Thank you.
Nick Linder, licensing officer.
Carol Stephenshire, licensing manager.
Claire Buchanan, minuting the meeting for Democratic Services.
Shane Oliver, applicant.
Mike Tunnicliffe, applicant.
Okay. The subcommittee has read all the written comments on the application, which are included in the report. I understand that the following persons wish to address the committee. Chris Scruton, is that the way I pronounce your name? Scrap, sorry. We can only consider the issues relating to the 4 licensing objectives: prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance and protection of children. The subcommittee will also have regard to the national guidance and the council's licensing policy. The licensing manager, please introduce.
This application relates to an application for the grant of a new premises licence under Section 17 of the Licensing Act 2003 for Me Belalooga, Brooklands Farm, Bishop's Waltham. The premises is a former shipping container which has been converted into a craft cider making facility, plus an area of surrounding land for patrons to sit outside. The application proposes that customers will be able to drink alcohol on the premises so that they can choose which to purchase to take away for off-site consumption. This application seeks to provide supply of alcohol for consumption on and off the premises. Friday to Monday, 9 AM to 9 PM. On page 24 of the report, under seasonal variations, the applicant has stated that due to the seasonal nature of cider production, the hours above are only likely to be applicable between April and October. Outside of these months, the premises is unlikely to be open. Mondays would only normally be applicable on bank holidays. If their licence application is granted, months of operation and bank holiday opening would be at the discretion of the licence holder, unless a condition is added to the premises licence to restrict its use during the months stated. The applicants state that the premises will not be accessible by vehicles and the premises will be a walk to premises. We sought clarification from the applicant during the consultation process, and they responded by saying, although we do envisage people sitting at the premises and drinking their purchases, generally this is likely to be only very low numbers of walkers as they pass by. We think that it is highly likely that the greatest proportion of sales will be made to people who take away their purchases to drink at home. Part of our idea also involves occasional small ticketed events at the land. We do not see there being any more people attending these events than there would be at a small public house. An example of this is that after being made, craft ciders are traditionally released in May, and small producers have events on their land when they are released. The whole concept is very much like cellar door sales in Australia and New Zealand. The applicant can provide more detail today. 4 valid representations were received against the application by other persons. The 4 representations were originally considered invalid by the licensing authority, as it was considered that they related to planning considerations. However, after seeking legal advice, they were accepted as valid, as the representations stated concerns relating to the safety of the public accessing the premises, which were not sufficiently mitigated in the application. These representations can be found at Appendix 2 on pages 41 to 46 of the report. In the representations, reference is made to planning permission. The Council's policy states at paragraph 1.4, prior to submitting an application to the licensing authority, the applicant should ensure that there is appropriate current planning permission for the hours and activities for which application is being made. If planning permission is not in place, the licence holder would be subject to planning enforcement under planning legislation and would not be subject to enforcement under licensing legislation. Page 126 of the section 182 guidance states that the planning and licensing regimes involve consideration of different, albeit related, matters. Licensing committees are not bound by decisions made by a planning committee and vice versa. The planning and licensing regimes are legally separate. Planning is directed at development of land and the use of the premises on that land. Licensing is the regime that is directed at licensable activities and responsible management of premises upon that land, and therefore the 2 regimes may not come to the same conclusions. Planning permission or lack of any lawful use is not a reason to grant or refuse a licensing application. Planning matters will only be considered where they relate to the promotion of the licensing objectives. The relevance of planning matters will be decided on a case-by-case basis. The subcommittee must consider the impact of providing licensable activities. In particular, any likelihood of public nuisance arising and the safety of the public attending for those purposes, with a view to the promotion of the licensing objectives. Section 182 guidance also refers to the safe departure of those using the premises, stating licence holders should make provision to ensure that premises users safely leave their premises. Measures that may assist include providing information on the premises of local taxi companies who can provide safe transportation home, and ensuring adequate lighting outside the premises, particularly on paths leading to and from the premises and in car parks. No representations were received from any responsible authority. There are conditions set out in section 5 of the report, which were offered as part of the operating schedule in the application for members to consider. Should the subcommittee be minded to grant the application, members may also wish to consider adding conditions which are appropriate to the premises and necessary and proportionate to promoting the licensing objectives. This may also be the case as a result of a hearing because of representations received. However, there should be a discussion during the hearing so that the applicants have an opportunity to respond and explain how other conditions may affect their business operation.
Thank you. So we've had no objections from any of the responsible authorities. Early. Right. So, can we ask the we're sitting in anticipation. Right, Mr. Scrutton, would you like to make your representations?
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry about that. They seem to be overdoing it, but they forgot last week.
No problem.
Sorry, Carol, forgot. Have I? Sorry?
The applicant's
Oh, my apologies. Yes. Yeah. No, I got stuck there. Have you got any questions?
Just one of the objections mentioned Brooklands Lane, which I can't find on the map. Is that another name for the footpath leading to the farm? On page 41. Sorry. Page 41. The applicant is hand, if you might be able to answer my question.
I think you'll find that Brooklands Lane hasn't got a name. It's a private lane. It's a private track and the footpath. But because it's just a private track that serves a certain number of premises, I don't think it's actually got a name. I think that's what you'll find. But it is the Pilgrim's Trail. The footpath part of it's one and the same.
Thanks.
That's a worry.
Yes, thank you. Are you going to present this, or are you just wanting us to question from the papers in front of us?
From the papers.
Okay, so I've got several questions that are coming to mind. I can either save them up till we've heard from the objectors and the applicant, or I can ask them now.
Are the questions of Nick's introduction, or are they perhaps aimed more for the applicant after they've put their application to you?
Possibly I can save them up. It doesn't really matter who answers them. So that might be easier. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Right, Mr. Stratton. Sorry, yeah. All right, so my apologies.
Okay, yeah, I just put together a bit of a background and a reason for the application, and just thinking that it might probably or possibly head off any of the further questions that you got. So we purchased approximately 3.5 acres of land on the outskirts of Bishop Waltham on Brooklands Farm in 2022, and after some consideration we decided that we would like to bring back to the area some traditional farming methods and crafts, such as the making of traditional craft cider, which was until the early 1900s very common on farmland all over the UK, which dates back to the Romans' introduction of apples and orcharding techniques. Our orchard, we planted 120 trees in winter 2022, and in addition to the apple orchard, we've also planted fruit trees, hedgerows, dug traditional drainage ditches to improve the drainage on our land, but also to alleviate flooding across the public footpath. And we created an allotment, and more recently beehives have been introduced onto the land. So it was just an overall thing. We bought it as a family venture, and it's just one of them things that we sort of thought we'd like to put this together. We are in our first full year of cider production, and we'll be using as many locally sourced apples as possible until our trees are fully producing. As part of the cider making process, we've registered with Winchester Council as a food production, which we got a 5-star rating. We've registered with HMRC as a private cider producer. We are now at the stage where we've blended this year's ciders and we're ready for sale, hence our application for the premises licence. The Pilgrim's Trail public footpath runs across the front of our land, and as a result of conversations with many of the walkers that pass by, one of the ideas is for people using the footpath to be able to call in to buy cider directly from the producer to take away. And in addition to this, we would also like people calling in to be able to sample different ciders before choosing which ones they would like to take away, or for them to just be able to sit, relax and enjoy mi bello lugar, which basically means my beautiful place in Spanish. The overall concept is sometimes, as I've said previously, referred to as a cellar door concept. If the licence was granted, it will be a welcome addition to our other streams of selling, which are via farmers markets, food and drink festivals, village fairs and a small number of local ale houses. Public safety and nuisance concerns, part of the footpath that gives access to mi bello lugar is a private lane that gives access to residential agricultural premises owned by the 4 people that have made the representations. A small number of commercial units also use are also on Brooklands Farm. I'm not sure exactly how many commercial units there are, but there's a small number, and a plot of equestrian land. Vehicle movements on the lane at present are infrequent, and the number of vehicles using the lane will not increase from the current levels if the licence is granted, because the premises, as stated previously, will be a walk to only, and we will always make this clear, encouraging any visitors to park at either Priory Park or Bishop Waltham Town and walk in either along the railway line or through Priory Park and down onto the land via the footpath. In addition to this, we'll offer free delivery for any off-site sales that people can't take away. So therefore, that also takes away the need for anyone to drive down to collect products. We have applied for 9 in the morning till 9 in the evening, Friday to Monday, which is considered to be fairly limited trading hours and fair trading hours. It is, however, unlikely that we'll be trading throughout these hours. It would be more a case of if we were on the land and working at the land, then we would be offering the sales. But by making this application, it does give us some flexibility at the peak of the cider selling season, which is in the summer. In all probability, there will be very low numbers of people calling in at any one time and then moving on as they continue their walk. We don't feel that this type of premises is likely to cause a public nuisance because the site is not immediately adjacent to any dwellings. The licence application is only for 4 days a week and only until 9 in the evening. We understand that there were no representations made from responsible authorities, which indicates that they were happy for the licence to be granted. We are starting out on a small family venture which will benefit the local economy. We fully support and have made provisions for further licensing objectives. We believe a licence shouldn't be denied based on hypothetical situations that are not likely to occur. We have every incentive that if the licence is granted to ensure that the licensing objectives are upheld, because there is no way that we would want the licence to be revoked. That's pretty much it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Oliver. Can I ask a couple of questions, please? Are you producing the cider on site? And are you bottling in aluminium or glass?
So in 20 litre bag in the box at the moment. The idea behind that is that we can get it out of barrels into the 20 litre bag in the box. From there, we could decant into smaller volumes, 2-pint cartons and the likes for people to take away. So it's a way of not creating loads, using loads and loads of different boxes and bottles and cans. And so it was just a way of reducing, keeping that all down to a minimum, mainly from a production perspective.
So you're producing on site?
Yes.
And then packing it down. So you've got a separate premises for doing that?
We've got this, it's a licensed cidery on site.
Right.
It's actually registered with Winchester. The cidery is actually on site.
Yeah, so
Got it.
the whole process happens
Oh, yeah.
on the farm.
And then if someone comes to purchase, they walk, where do they park then if they're,
It's a walk-to venue only.
and how far? Are you
Well,
having
it's
to
about
walk?
a 5-10 minute walk from the Priory Park or down the railway line from Bishop's Wharf and Town Centre.
So you'd carry what, 2.5 litres?
Most people are probably only going to buy
2
what,
pints
2
tops.
pints, 4 pints tops.
Right, okay.
Because we're decanting out of what is essentially a cask or a box, then you have to decant in pints. You can only do in pints, half pints, that kind of thing.
Like if you went to an ale house and you got a takeaway with a 2-pint milk carton, it would be labelled and filled for the customer.
But there is also the option for somebody to say, well, I'd like to take away a 10 litre box or a 20 litre box. That way, then what we would do is we would say to them, we'll drop that off for you.
Right, okay. And then waste at that site, is there access to your production area, but not access to where you're proposing to sell from? Have I got that right? So
There's access to the site. We have vehicle access to our site ourselves. It's as part of our purchase of the land. We've got
You've
the right
got
to
access.
access. We have a right
so
to.
there's a limited access.
Yes,
But you
it's limited access
wouldn't want to increase.
for the actual premises, license purposes. We wouldn't be having people down there in vehicles. But if we have, say, if we come down to the land or we have anyone bringing, I mean, say for example, we've got allotments on the land. We've had topsoil delivered down to the land. That's perfectly
That's okay.
permittable.
Okay.
So-
And do you live on the site?
No.
No,
No, we live in Walton Chase,
right,
so
Yeah.
we live in the next village along.
okay. So waste is managed how?
Yeah, the only waste would be cardboard, realistically. So we would just break down the cardboard boxes and take them from site ourselves. That's realistically the only waste that we're going to create.
Okay.
There's no other real waste.
And do you propose to have music whilst you're?
No, we haven't done anything with the PPL licensing yet. We may do at some point, but that would only be for events if we did do it. But we don't really see that it's going to be
And is it only,
normal.
so final question, so I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Is it only cider you're selling, or are you proposing to sell other spirits or alcohol?
At the moment, we're just looking at the ciders. I mean, at the end of the day, if it's licensed and somebody comes down then and they've got a partner with them and the partner doesn't drink cider, then potentially we might look at like having a bottle of wine in or something like that. But it's not really for that purpose. It's mainly just for the cider. It's really just a way of getting traditional. As I said, it's just another stream. We're already on the farmers markets and things like that. It's all the more traditional ways of getting it out. And it's just a stream that people walking past the land have constantly been saying to us, so when can we buy it from the land? Can we buy some off you now? And we're like, no, we can't sell it to you. You know, that's literally the concept behind it. To be honest, I don't think the full sort of picture has come across as to just how small the kind of thing that we're thinking of realistically. It's just purely because we're only going to ever produce small volumes. I mean, we purposely put 120 trees because, I mean, there was a cut-off point with HMRC. It's changed now on strengths of alcohol. Now there was a cut-off point before at 7,000 litres. So that them 120 trees maximum producing will produce around about 7,000 litres. So it was all based around being a small cider producer, never growing to like 20, 30, 40,000 litres of cider. It's not in our, I don't want to do that. I've got to the point where I don't want to be doing that kind of thing. I just want to do it as just bring that craft back, really. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
Shall I go?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, you say the side is accessed by a road which is you own, private own. Is that road blocked by a gate that you could close to prevent vehicle access?
But what you've actually got is you've got 2 layers of gates. So all the way down the lane is free access, the main part of the lane. It then branches off down and comes on a right angle or on a hairpin bend back down to our plot of land, a neighbouring plot of land, and the equestrian plot of land. So 3.5 acre plots are serviced off a separate road, of which we're all 3 of us are responsible for maintaining. So the first bit is responsible. In total there's about 20 people, but some of them are right at the top of the lane. It's away from the walking path completely. There's only a small number that actually come to the lower part of the lane, and then when it branches off onto ours, there's 3 people responsible for that. There is a double layer of gates, so there's a layer of gates, but it's almost at our land anyway, the first gate, and then each plot of land has got their gate on it. The top gate, the way it works, the way we work it is that if any one of the 3 people is at their land, that gate is open. Yeah. And then if other people coming in and the last person out closes that gate there. Now that does give you a second gate, but you'd be almost at our land anyway by the time you've got to that first gate. And I can't see that. I mean, one of the people that has made a representation is one of the neighbouring plot of land. Now, if that gate is shut every time everyone's in, they're just going to be in a situation where they're going, well, they want to nip out. They've now got to open 2 gates. And realistically, it is not in any way the kind of lane that people just accidentally drive down. It's a completely private lane and I mean, if you get one person coming down to ours by mistake, that's no different than one person coming down to any of the other pieces of land by mistake, which could happen. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but the chances, because everything that we ever do it's walked in. That's it. That's what we are, because we know that it's just on this public footpath. That's it.
Okay, if I can just make sure that I understand correctly, you're saying that there is a specific gate for your specific property, which you can close, without causing any inconvenience to your neighbours.
Yes.
And knowing how sat-navs work, that people could type in the name of your farm into their car, sat-nav or whatever, and be led down that lane to your property.
Potentially, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean people that sort of thing happens.
Yes.
But if you had that gate closed, there'd be no
They couldn't get on.
no possibility of them possibly parking on the property.
So it's a big farmer's 5-bar gate. You can't get on with deer fence and it's 6 foot high.
And during the normal course of events, that gate is closed with a sign saying private property. If you want to buy cider,
that's what I mean.
Yes, you can't accidentally walk onto the property.
you can't accidentally drive into the property.
Can't drive, walk, anything. You can't get onto the property without it being open.
Without our gate being open, no.
More questions about what you were planning to do. So you said you have a variety of ciders.
Yes.
Can you sort of explain, are they different flavours, different strengths?
So the way cider is made is you blend different types of apples. So you get single variety ciders, you get apple ciders that are blended with, like take for example, Thatcher's has probably got about 50 to 60 different apples in it. You get single variety ciders that have just got one type of apple. So we grow a range of, I think it's 12 different apples now. And then obviously each year, because of the sunlight, every apple tastes different, and you can blend and make them taste how you want them to taste.
And also then, as well as the back sweetening, so you can have different sweetnesses. Every cider will ferment out to dry. Naturally, it will eat all the sugars, it'll ferment out to dry. And then what you can do is you can back sweeten your ciders to get different, obviously different sweetness levels, dry, medium dry, whatever. So yeah. So
one of the reasons for the bees is particularly for the back sweetening the traditional way would be you'd have your dry cider and mix honey in as you were drinking.
Okay, so just to clarify, the alcohol content of these different types of cider will be the same broadly?
No, so it all depends on basically the year you have, the sun, everything. So it's all down to the amount of sugar in the apples and how well it ferments. So that's all tested throughout the process. So we've got an accurate reading of the strengths of the ciders, and we can weaken. We can't obviously make them stronger. But you have, say if we had 3 different ciders, one might be a 5, one might be a 4.5%, one might be a 6.5%.
Well, you test at the first, when you first press the apples, you test the sugar content of the apples using a hydrometer, and you're taking the initial base reading, and that base reading will give you what the potential alcohol is when it's fully fermented out. So if it as soon as it's fully fermented out, you know that the difference between that and that gives you an alcohol, an ABV. So yeah, so it's all.
The reason I ask is because one of our options is to condition the license, which may have, you can serve alcohol up to a certain percentage.
Yeah.
And you would be, if we said, for instance, no alcohol should be served which is more than 7%.
Yeah.
You would be capable of doing that.
Yeah, it's very, but it's very unlike most of our side. It's quite
the highest cider you'd ever see is probably an 8.5%, and we're not looking at making anything that strong because, in all honesty, it's like rocket fuel. Look, we don't want people drinking that sort of stuff.
So what we would generally do with that is weaken that down.
Yeah, we
bring it down. We made one last year that was 7.6, but that's but I mean the starting of one of those ciders was 9.5. Well, you can't do that because it's a wine anyway. So anything over 8.5 trips over into wine anyway. It's a different HMRC category. So we definitely wouldn't be going over 8.5. And realistically, it's not about trying to see how strong we can make a cider. That's not our objective.
And from what we've seen from all the ale houses we frequent and all the places we go, if people do drink an 8.5% cider, they're only drinking one, because people who drink your real ales, your ciders, they're not going out to get drunk. They're going out to taste the different alcohols, the different beers and ales. They're not the sort of people that will go out and just think, well, right, I'm getting on it. It's not that sort of venue, not at all.
Okay, it's because I grew up in Somerset, I know what rocket fuel cider it tastes like. So the way you envisage your business working is that people come in and they have a selection to taste.
Yeah.
So what sort of quantity? Because you said you can dispense in half pint measures.
Third of a pint. We've got third pint glasses. So we would be serving a third of a pint. If somebody was tasting multiples, they would be only taking a third of a pint of different ones, because we've got third of a pint glasses already. So that's what we would be using.
So
it's more of a taster event as opposed to going to have a pint of each one and then suddenly go, well, I've had 3 pints of 6% cider and now I haven't got a clue which one I want to choose because I can't remember what the first one tasted like. That's not the.
So would it be possible for you to only serve alcohol on the premises in those quantities in sort of third of a pint glasses?
Yeah, we can do third, half pints, whatever. If there was a restriction put on, we could only serve in thirds. It all depends on what size glass you buy.
Sell in larger quantities.
Yeah, but you'd sell to wholesale to take off the premises in large quantities. You mentioned this on the Pilgrim's Trail, and you get hikers walking past on a hot sunny day. They might be popping into your premises and going, I don't drink cider. Would it be saying soft drinks and water as well?
Yeah,
we would definitely prefer soft drinks and water.
One of the main reasons we looked into this sort of avenue is the amount of walkers walking. Oh, sorry. One of the main reasons we've looked into this avenue is the amount of walkers walking past and stopping and taking interest and saying, you know what, it would be great to be able to sit and sample, and it's beautiful. You've got kites, there's thrush, there's deers in the adjacent field. People just really like to sit and enjoy the area and sample what's being made on the property and maybe take some away.
There are non-alcoholic
Yeah,
Yeah, so yeah, so well, so yeah, you know, juice water.
And the last question refers to one of the objections, which mentioned that the premises is used for camping.
That we've come down there as a family, what, 2 or 3 times. But it's our family land, it's family land, that's it. It's not a campsite. It's
So-
never been used as a campsite.
So this statement that there's a campsite nearby,
No.
that is erroneous, and we should disregard that, you think?
Yeah, there isn't a campsite at all. There's never been a campsite.
Those are my questions, thanks.
Quick question to Carol first before I'll carry on. Is a third of a pint a legal measure?
Yes, a good example is the stable.
Yeah.
They have third of a pints, and I think it's 5, which you buy, where you can try all the different ciders,
Yeah.
and it's either by menu, but yes, in short, third of a pints are a legal value. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to make sure that we're on the right track there. Now you say that you only going to produce 7,000 litres a year.
That would be our maximum. I mean, we've done 2,000 litres this year.
So if the business took off, would you be wanting to bring in other apples from other suppliers?
No, I don't want to go over whatever the trees produce, and the trees would produce at a fully producing year with 200 kilos off each tree, and not every tree will produce.
Yeah,
You'll get
sure.
off years with some trees. So 200 kilos, you would be talking a maximum of 12,000 kilos. Yeah. And 12,000 kilos, then when you start to break that down, you actually turn out that when you're pressed, you get about 66%, in between 66% and 70% yield, as they call it. So your kilos turns to litres, and you really would be looking around about that 7,000 maximum anyway. But that's way down the line. I mean, this is probably us for a good couple of 3 years before they even start to produce properly and all the rest of it. We have got trees sourced at the moment. We have apples sourced that are in Swanmore, which is again one of the next villages along. So that's pretty much where the apples are coming from at the moment. But our trees are capable of doing that amount, and I'm not really interested in doing any more than that. So,
Okay. If we were looking at the opening hours, would you be happy to think about only opening during the days of times of daylight rather than?
the issue behind that is like where do you set the hours of daylight? How would we? And the only reason we've gone across it so is it gives us some flexibility to go up to the latest point realistically in the height of the summer that there might be people walking past. Because after 9 o'clock, there's not really going to be, and we aren't down there. We're not going to be down there sitting waiting for 1 or 2 walkers to come in.
Okay.
So we get that totally. I get what you're saying, but at the same time, it's very hard for us to say daylight hours, because where does the line come with daylight hours? And I think 9 o'clock is not going to cause anyone any harm. You know, realistically, if people are still out and about walking around in the middle of summer at 9 o'clock, they don't. You know.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the times when it's dark at 9 o'clock. Right. Any other questions?
No.
No.
No, thanks.
Yeah, through you. Would you mind if I ask the applicants a couple of
No,
questions?
please do.
Thank you. I could just ask you a couple of questions, but on the back of that, one of the promotion of public safety relates to lighting, and the officer read out in his introduction the guidance in relation to section 182 guidance in relation to lighting, which was ensure adequate lighting outside the premises, particularly on paths leading to and from the premises and in car parks. So what would you, on the basis that you say that you would probably trade all year round, but limited to April to October, perhaps ask that question first. Is that what primarily you're seeking, April to October, or are you seeking?
Well, My understanding of licensing is you've either got a license or you haven't, and I didn't know that you could even break it down into different times of the year, or, you know, so we were just literally applying for a license. We would like to serve all year round. The issue would be that in the middle of winter, if there's a nice day, we might be down there and we might serve, but we're not going to be down there in the depth of winter, dark. We're not going to be down there. It's as simple as that. So yes, we would like the opportunity to use it as and when, because otherwise we're looking at keep applying for temporary events notices or something like that. When what we're really saying is if there was something that we could have all year round, and we just really pitched it at 9 till 9, just for the highest peak of the season. But the realities of it are we get 9 to 9, but we aren't going to really be open 9 till 9. But it does give us that all year round flexibility that at those times when we do want to be open at that, not till 9 o'clock and the height of summer, you know. And I mean, again, it's not because we'd be doing anything other than catering for your people walking past. So we're not going to be sitting around waiting for people. But if it seems a particularly busy day, particularly warm day, and there is a lot of people about and they're still coming past, then we'll say, well, we might be sat there just relaxing ourselves and we'll service people.
So if you obviously October, for example, we know it's dark by 6, 7 o'clock. What would you propose if you had walkers coming in at, you know, 5:30, 6?
We probably wouldn't be open because if it's dark down there, we're not going to be down there. In all fairness, it's a case of we're there when it's nice. We can't do anything ourselves down there in that time of year in the dark, so we're not going to be open.
On the back of that, you're saying the premises aren't going to be lit in effect.
No, we don't want to pollute with light or anything like that.
So you don't
no need for it.
So that answers the question there. If it's dark, you won't.
In all fairness, but
Okay.
going around it, if it's dark, we'll be shut.
Yeah.
We don't need to light the area because we won't be open.
And you've got one of the objectors has alluded to a planning consent, which is for an agricultural store, which actually, if I hold this, this is the site.
Yeah.
So you are the green dot. This is page 39 of the agenda pack. So you're
the little green dot. So that number
the
1 is the whole plot of land.
So that's the
yeah. So you can see like the hedge line all the way around.
So to the east, directly to the east of that, going towards the pink red boundary, I think that's the private road or public.
No, that's the old railway line.
Yeah, that's
the railway
village
line
road,
there.
yeah.
Is it to the east of it?
That's it, yeah.
And it's to that boundary that you have that permission for the agricultural store that was granted in 2022.
Yes.
The agricultural store is over to the east in about the middle height of the land.
Okay. And does the access to that cross through the premises that you have, where you've shown in your supplemental agenda? You've got, it's difficult to tell, but this is the first page where it says towards the proposed licence area.
Yes.
The allotment. So is there an access through to that store?
The store doesn't exist at the moment.
It
not built.
doesn't exist. It's not built.
Oh, it's not built.
Both use your microphones. Thank you.
Sorry. Because there's we applied for a plan. We initially spoke to the person who sold the land originally. We were the second purchaser of the land after it had been split up. We initially spoke to the person who sold the land initially about the potential for putting on an agricultural barn of 280 square metres, which was really for this purposes. And initially his response was, I don't see an issue with that. Then when we got the planning permission for it, he said, I've got a covenant on that land and you can't build that barn. So we went, okay, fair enough. And then we tried to negotiate with him about building the barn, and it ultimately came down to his agent saying perhaps if we gave him some money, he might see his way to letting us build the barn. So that was when we took the decision to put the containers on the land, because it was a case of because to go to a tribunal, our understanding was it was going to cost us a fortune to try and get the covenant lifted. So rather than going to a tribunal, we said, well, we'll try and continue with what we were trying to do, by doing it with containers, trying to make the containers blend in as much as possible. They're all painted British Racing Green to try and blend in. And then obviously you may already know there is planning issues in the background. Those planning issues, we're in talks with the planners anyway about that, because they've now asked if we would put in for a planning for those containers as well as having planning for the barn, which if we need to go down that road, that's what we'll do, because they're obviously people look at containers and sometimes they're considered to be temporary, sometimes they're considered to be permanent, and at the end of the day, if we need to look with the planners at dealing with that, and then we'll deal with that with the planners. But they saw no reason why we couldn't have the barn, and they have already said they don't really see an issue with the containers, but it's whether we need to go down that route. So that's how the two things are sort of a bit intertwined.
Well, that's very helpful. I hope members find it helpful. So what you're saying is that there might be a need for planning consent for the containers, and obviously that you're in active negotiations with the planners at the moment. But at the moment, there's no permission, or it hasn't been ruled out that permission isn't required.
No.
Okay.
No.
Right. Okay. Yes, is on the premises when the alcohol's
Yeah, no, we would have other people as necessary. At the moment, it would be me on there as a licensed. I've got a personal license, and I would be there at the moment. But we are also looking at, for example, Mike, because all it is me and my wife and my daughter and my son-in-law, which is Mike. So if I wasn't there, Mike would be there. If Mike wasn't there, I would be there.
I'm currently also in the process of getting my personal license. So when Shane wasn't there, I would be there with the license.
Because you're not required as a DPS to be there all the time. But what is is obviously having staff who are responsible for running them and having adequate training. So
the likelihood is I'm going to be there most of the time, because we moved down here from the Midlands permanently to Bishop's Waltham, and this is like my main. This is what I do Monday to Friday. I pretty much work on the land. So yeah.
One more matter. Do you intend to limit the amount of? You said about people being muddled if they took more than 3 samples, they forget which side of they.
Well,
they
yeah,
like
as a responsible person doing licensing, I would say we're not going to serve you anymore. Right. It's simple as that. Yes.
So do you intend to limit samples if there's different strengths of alcohol? I think Councillor Morris alluded to that. If somebody was going to sample up to 5, or I'm just saying that as a.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would just use my responsibilities as a license holder to make sure that we were not. It's not what we're setting out to do, to see how much alcohol we can serve to anyone.
No,
we're just controlling it. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, please.
In your opening, you mentioned what you had the potential running small ticketed events. Can you go into more detail how you envisage those working, and whether outside groups will be able to hire your site as a venue for private parties, wedding receptions?
No, absolutely not. No. The only thing that we've even sort of considered is, say, for example, well, we've got a release tomorrow night in Bishop's Waltham at a bar in Bishop's Waltham. That release event is releasing this year's ciders, because this is when they become ready. And a tradition is that if in Hereford and those sort of areas on the West Country, they release the ciders May Bank Holiday weekend. That's usually when they're released. That's when the trees are in blossom. So you've got trees in blossom. They release it. They release on the land. Just so people can see this is what they do. They do tours of the cideries. They explain how the cider is made. That's the kind of thing we'd be doing. And if you're talking numbers, we're sort of like 75, 100 people maximum. And that would be just like an afternoon, evening, potentially a hog roast or something like that, and that's it. So you've got your pork and apple kind of thing. That's the kind of thing that we're talking of, but we're talking very few and far between. But that's the kind of thing that in the future we were sort of thinking maybe to run something like that.
Thanks.
No more questions.
Thank you.
Actually, can I ask the officers? Officers, does the having events of 75 to 100 people, is that something that changes the nature of the license, or something we should factor into it?
The days of the week and the timing are on the license anyway. If there's anything in particular, from what Mr. Oliver's described there's nothing that needs to be referred to in the license, and that if it's within the timings of their license and on the days of the week anyway, it's if they're likely to be departing different from their license that you would need, or whether there's any particular conditions that you think might be appropriate because of the events on the land. But in terms of the numbers, that's low level, that wouldn't go through the safety advisory group, for example. They may need to put in place additional measures, but that would be required under risk assessments, for example, which they would have to do anyway if they're a public place where they're having people attending the premises anyway. They may need to do a separate risk assessment for the events that they'll have on site. And that's something that would be required, but not necessarily conditioned as a licence. It's an example is the fire safety order. So although the Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service are a responsible authority, they don't add conditions in relation to fire safety because there's different legislation. And so whether that's indoors, outdoors, if it's indoors, that would trigger fire safety order, for example.
Triggers outdoors as well. I'm a fire safety consultant originally, so it does trigger indoors or outdoors if you've got events like that.
So there would be additional legislation that wouldn't need to be required as part of the condition for licensing, that they would need to make sure that they include when they're planning the events.
So the license as applied for has no upper limits to the number of people who can attend. Is that correct?
So the upper limit of the premises license application is 5,000. And what that does is effectively trigger an additional fee where there's going to be more than 5,000 people. So most premises license applications have an upper limit of 5,000. Capacity numbers, again, are dealt with by the fire safety legislation. That's not something that we put on premises licenses unless it's for an over 5,000 limit. So festivals, for example, is where we would put limits on the numbers in the license because that is triggered by the additional over 5,000. But otherwise, the limit is effectively up to 5,000. Given what the risk assessment says, though, because they might not have room for 5,000.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I just say, just to clarify as well, we're not looking at anywhere near that sort of numbers. We're talking sort of 5 to 6 people walking past and stopping and trying a bit of cider and walking off. We're not. We'll be odd maybe in a couple of years, a May bank holiday weekend when we release a cider, and like Shane said, about 75 people tops. So we're not looking at thousands of people. We're not interested in that. We don't want the hassle that comes with it. We don't want to. We're not. That's not what we're going for.
Okay, so we're done.
You guys?
No.
Right. Yes, please.
So hi everyone. I've been asked to speak today on behalf of one of the local residents and their family, the adjacent landowner to the applicant, and as well for my own interests as being the nearest resident to the site. Speaking for myself only to start with, I don't in principle object to what the applicants are trying to do, which is grow cider and make apples and use in the countryside setting for genuine agricultural purposes. However, collectively, we are all in objection that the application to sell alcohol from the site moves it from an agricultural purpose through to a commercial or retail activity, albeit on a small scale. At the very least, we do think a planning application should go in for change of use to the site, which has been addressed sort of on the surface level here today, I suppose. So obviously we can only object around the 4 objectives which are set out by the Licensing Act, which is what we tried to do in the initial representations that we made. The first one that we objected over was the public safety. The summary of our objections here really was that the applicants were applying for a walkers only licence, which is logical and makes sense for the site that they're trying to operate from. Our concern, though, is that there isn't a genuine way to prevent this. As Councillor Morris says, people do go on Google, they do pop in the name of Mi Bella Luga on SatNav, and they will potentially attempt to go to the site via vehicles. And if they do head down the track, which is albeit gated and small, it is going to cause issues with vehicles going in and going out. The track is the track is used by walkers, and it is also shared for other agricultural and commercial vehicles, which obviously have restricted visibility out of those vehicles due to their size. So we do believe there is a genuine concern by potentially increasing the number of walkers heading down that area specifically for the purpose of buying or consuming alcohol. One of the other reasons for objection was around the public nuisance. During summer months, the noise generated by people drinking throughout the hours of 9 till 9 is not necessarily in keeping with the location. I would also suggest in certain situations, if things were to go out of control outside the intention of what the applicants are doing, for example, if somebody did drink too much or did become a bit intoxicated or something like that, then it could potentially deter people who are already using the Pilgrims Trail and the walking route away from those who are intending to turn up to drink at the site or to purchase alcohol. Under the initial objections that we raised, the response from the licensing officers, it was that some of our objections are speculative. It does state under the Licensing Act's guidance that it's perfectly reasonable for an individual to raise a concern in relation to one or more of the licensing objectives, such as granting of the application could lead to noise nuisance. As the application stage at the moment is only at the initial stage, by very nature of the majority of our objections is that they will be speculative. It isn't possible to evidence the future. Previous licensing applications and subcommittees have been known to make decisions based upon predictive judgments rather than waiting for something to take action. Rather than waiting for something to occur before taking action. Some of the objections that were raised by the representees that were labelled as speculative were access for commercial waste vehicles and how waste would be removed from the site. Obviously, the applicant has stated that it would mostly be cardboard, but as an owner of a small business myself, somebody who started a business that was small with the intentions to remain small, when it becomes popular and when it grows and you get customers, it just goes, your motivations change, your enthusiasms change. And my concern would be that with that, the size of the site and the activities taking place would grow as well. Another one of the concerns that was labelled as speculative was the access for emergency service vehicles. The application by its very nature would be looking to drive more people to the rural location, which by default would increase the likelihood of the need for emergency service vehicles attending at a site that isn't that easy to find. Alcohol increases minor crime and antisocial behaviour. The location of this site is out of town and it's not policed. The local council does not have the means or resources to enforce the licence and any associated conditions. So granting, in my opinion, would not be sensible. The site in question is in a countryside location. According to Hampshire County Council's website, it is the Pilgrims Trail and the Bishop's Waltham Heritage Walk is a thing to do in the countryside. The countryside is defined as land outside of built-up areas, and under the Hampshire County Council's MTRA4 planning strategy, it doesn't fall within the sort of designated uses of countryside land. As the applicant mentioned, there was a previous application for planning put in for a barn, which has been granted. During the application for that barn, I did raise an objection, and we had a response from the applicant, which I'm paraphrasing, but they said they were looking to develop an agricultural small holding, part of which will be an orchard of around 100 trees, and to grow fruit and vegetables for a more sustainable life for their family. I genuinely wish the applicant all the success possible with an agricultural small holding, growing apples and other fruits and vegetables, and even producing cider on the site through sale through channels such as festivals and private events, such as the one being held at George and Bishop's Waltham. However, I strongly contest that the use of the agricultural land with an alcohol licence in a countryside setting, selling alcohol to passers-by or to people arriving to the site by walking, is a correct use of the land and are not in line with the objectives set up by the Licensing Act and the Winchester County Council. I apologise to Shane and Tracy that I've delivered such strong objections. As hollow as it may seem, I do genuinely wish that you enjoy your land in the way that you wish. It's a very nice piece of land in a very nice part of the country. I fully understand why you're there and what you're trying to do. But my genuine concern is, as the popularity of Mi Bella Luga grows and your customer base increases, the licensing, the alcohol license isn't there and isn't capable of preventing it from growing into a much bigger business with events on the weekends of 75, 100 people week in, week out. And yeah, that's the nature of my objection. Really. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was a
Yeah.
question. Thank you very much. And just picking up on that point, this is probably addressed to Laura and Carol around enforcement issues, antisocial behaviour, noise, littering, that sort of nuisance that could result if this was suddenly the main attraction in Bishop's Waltham. What remedy do we have? Is it for our enforcement team to pick up on those issues? And would we be in a position to suspend the licence should we need to? I think that's important to understand, you know, if things don't go to plan, as we've heard today, what are our remedies in putting that right as a city council? Thank you.
So the Licensing Act 2003 has what's called a review application, and that's for premises licenses or club premises certificates. So this is where members of the public and agencies have much more control over the licence versus something like planning. So where there is evidence that any one or more of the licensing objectives are being undermined, any person or responsible authority can apply for a review of the premises licence. And what that would do is then trigger public notices on the site, and then any person or responsible authorities can also then join in on that review, make the representations, and then that would come before a subcommittee to decide whether or not to take any action. There's different options available to the members. It could be to remove the DPS, so in certain circumstances with pubs that's relevant. It could be to suspend their licence, to modify the conditions, to take no action, or to revoke the licence completely. So there is a mechanism in place in the Licensing Act to take action if the conditions themselves were not being complied with. That is a separate offence under the Licensing Act 2003. So there's a difference between they have the licence but it's not working out, or it's grown bigger and it's becoming much more of a problem and you review the licence. But if there is direct non-compliance with the licence, that would be subject to enforcement and potential prosecution. Or yeah, that's kind of the worst case scenario, is prosecution. But obviously we a staggered approach in terms of how we deal with compliance of conditions on the licence.
That's really helpful to understand, actually. So there is an option for neighbours if there are concerns down the line, if we grant this application today, that there is a recourse potentially for residents locally.
Yes, and also there's the environmental protection team. They deal with noise nuisance or any form of nuisance, pretty much any form of nuisance, that they have their own procedure in terms of investigation, reporting. They often go out to premises and monitor, and that then decides or effectively backs up whether the information provided by the parties is true. They could then also trigger the review of the licence if then they say, yeah, we've been to a resident's property, for example, and we do think it's unreasonable the level of nuisance that's being held at the venue. So often that might be the environmental health. Then they have other pieces of legislation. So depending on the circumstances, would dictate on how they manage that themselves. I think it's worth mentioning also that members of the committee, and that's something you can bring forward with the applicant, is if the number of events are a concern also, that's something that could be conditioned, and that perhaps for you at some point to go back to the applicant to decide that. But it doesn't have to be open-ended. You could limit the number of events per week, per month, per year, but obviously that would need to be in discussion with what it is that you're proposing.
So we're more than happy to give personal contact details to yourselves and the other residents for any issues that may arise. You know, more than happy to contact us directly. You know, we're more than happy to say, for example, if we did have an event or when the cider was released, to give you plenty of notice to work with you, basically work with the residents to try and make everything as smooth as possible.
So is that okay? Yeah. So I understand there is a route for raising a concern or objection. Would it be fair to say that if the license was granted as it sits now, in theory, although this isn't the intention, I accept that, in theory, there would be no prevention to stop anything Friday to Monday between 9 and 9:52 weeks a year, up to 5,000 people and up to 7,000 litres of cider being consumed. So my concern would be that that's quite a big level. So if there was sort of quite frequent events and a lot of people there, I would expect the response to be, well, they're operating within the licence conditions. So even if there was quite frequent things going on, there's actually very little that the licensing office can do at that point.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that that we all need to understand is that with licensing, the license can be reviewed at any particular time for good reason. With planning, it's far more difficult, and that's why there's a big difference between the planning and the licensing. So you can always object to what if it's not conforming to the license. I think that's right, isn't it, Carol?
Yes, and if I can go further, if you might, Chair, and yes, effectively what you're saying is true, and I think that's why it's useful here now to then understand from the applicant actually what the Licensing Act 2003 for a new premises licence is one application form. As you can imagine, there's so many different possibilities. It's deliberately wide by the government, but actually that's why we often find ourselves in this situation, because it's difficult on the form to actually say exactly what it is that you want to do, and that's where conditions of licence come in. So that's for the members to consider today, alongside with discussion with the applicants. If they then said, well, you can have X number of events per week or month or year, limit the numbers of people in terms of the safety from the fire safety order, that's where the conditions of licence can come in, so that can then restrict or not be so. And that's what we often get, is that residents do get anxious, because when you put it like that, that's exactly what they could do. But in reality, and then conditions of licence then can restrict that. So I think that's potentially a discussion that members will have today anyway, and whether also the timings of the year, or whether it's all year round. But yes, that effectively is what it could be. It's just whether in reality is what happens.
If I might just add to that very useful comment by the licensing manager, it's entirely without prejudice to the decision you might make. It's open here and now for the applicants to discuss with yourselves and the local residents any conditions that you might like to offer, you're prepared to offer, because this is an open discussion, it's an open forum, so that members can then consider that. It's much better if you can agree anything, but as I said, that's without prejudice to the decision that the members might take. But I mean, if you did want a little bit of time for that as well, that's possible.
I mean, to be honest, we just say that we would be probably happy to put a limit on of 100 and say that we would apply for a temporary events notice for anything outside of that.
Can't really see that.
We can't really see it happening, but we would more than, because we literally, myself and my wife, do not want to get involved with doing big events. We're not interested in all of that. It's not what we ever sort of thought of. So if it gave you some comfort that realistically we would not, and I mean, and when I say limit to 100, you'd be invited to come down. You know what I mean? It's one of them things where we literally do not want to give anyone. All the way along, our intention with this has never been to create anything that gave anyone any grief. All it is people just saying as they come past, can we buy any cider off you?
Yeah.
That is it. And that is pretty much it. The only thing that ever keeps coming back up is it would be so nice to release the cider on the land, and you're not selling, or you would never be selling all of your cider on the land. No. That's not what we want to do. We want to do farmers markets. We want to do, like we started with Bishop's Waltham Summer Fair last year. That was our first point, and we sold all that we made last year in 3 hours at Bishop's Waltham, and it was gone. And we thought, crikey, perhaps this is something that we could do. And we had already planted the trees and thought it might be possible, but we thought we might be knocking it on the head within the first year. And it was literally just something that we want to just enjoy doing and want other people to enjoy. And we want to bring good cider to the East Coast. That's it.
Anything else?
Yeah, I have questions. We repeat some of the questions I asked the applicant. In your submission, you mentioned in public nuisance that the premises used for camping and overnight stays. Is that the case? Can you give some more details on that, please?
So I can't remember exactly how I phrased it. If it's been interpreted that it was being used as a campsite by anybody other than the landowners, no, that's not true to my understanding. I do believe that the landowners have stayed over there some nights. I do believe they're entitled to do that, and I have no idea of how many nights, and we're not keeping track of it because it's their land and they can do what they wish with it. So yes, it was in the initial objection, but no, if it's been construed that other people or it was being used as a camping business or something, that wasn't the intention of the comment.
Thank you. And regarding the gate entrance to the premises, you mentioned there's a gate which is exclusively for your premises. If that gate was closed and inaccessible, would that inconvenience? Do you think that would inconvenience you or any of your neighbours?
No, not at all.
And
I just think we need to make sure we're all on about the same gate, because if you put something on that says that first gate has to be shut, that would inconvenience the two neighbours with the equestrian and the other plot. They would have to open that every time they came in or out of their land. They'd have to open that and their own gate, and it could inconvenience them. But then again, neither, like say for example, our neighbouring plot, the immediate neighbouring plot, they come to the land usually about 12 o'clock and they leave at 5. Their vehicle doesn't move after in between there. The neighbour after that, the one with the equestrian land, they might go out twice in that time frame. But we are putting an extra thing there that I don't think they might be happy about doing if we do that. And it's literally just an extra gate. So, and I don't think it's, if you've got your car coming down by mistake, they would come down to this gate, which is at a dead end, and then they would have to reverse back up the road. Whereas if that gate was open, they could actually turn round and come back out forwards. So I don't think putting that gate on, which I don't think you're on about, but I just want to make sure that we don't close a gate off that could cause more problems.
No, my concern is that whether we can condition to make it physically impossible for people to drive into your property without inconveniencing anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be the intention. The condition. Anyway, a question for the Chris. How much use does the Pilgrims Trail get at the moment? Would you say that it's causes any public nuisance or concern, or whether it's lightly used at the moment?
Don't really know how to quantify how much use it gets, but no, I don't believe there's any public nuisance from it at the moment. Not that I'm aware of anyway. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I mean, it's whether it has spare capacity, as it were, in terms of or whether if it's incredibly busy, then you go any more footfall would be disruptive. But if it's already quiet, you could think more footfall might not actually make any difference.
No, it's not incredibly busy. On a sunny day on the weekend in the summer, I reckon we probably see, not that I've ever counted, but I don't know, somewhere between 100 and or around 100 people probably walk past down every day. Yeah. Yeah, I've never sat in the garden and done this, but it's definitely.
I would say the busiest. I would say that the busiest time of day with vehicle movements up and down, I mean, is generally Monday to Friday between 9 and 5. And that's vehicles going to the commercial units. They're the only ones that actually move on the lane. Otherwise, people like yourselves and us, we come in, we'll spend a number of hours there before we even move again. So, you know, it's not heavily used by either traffic or pedestrians.
And you mentioned that the site is, I think, is it private car park, or there's one car park at the end of the footpath.
So you've got Priory Park, which is a public sports centre, council car park that is advertised for walkers, people playing sports on the fields, and for a few other activities. It's actually advertised on the council website. And then you've got pay and display car parks in Bishop's Waltham town.
Okay, so my question to Chris is, those car parks, are they how large are they, and are they currently capacity, just so we can estimate how many potential customers could be going into this site at one time?
Yes, so I think there's 2 public car parks in Bishop's Waltham, which are probably roughly 75 to 100 spaces each. I think the one in Priory Park is a little bit smaller. At the weekends, I know the ones in Bishop's Waltham do get quite busy, but as I don't really drive into the village that much, I don't try and park in the village that much, so I'm probably not best placed to comment on how busy they get or how much capacity they have. But yeah, there are the 3 car parks there that probably take 200 to 300 cars.
Thanks.
Yeah, for you. Is it possible to on the map on page 39, just going to ask both the applicant and Mr. Scrutton, is it possible to say where the gates are? Because the bungalow is, well, if I hold it up and then because Mr. Scrutton, the bungalow is below the bottom pink line, isn't it? Yeah. So this is page 37.
So this road comes up and here. The bungalow is back here.
Mhm.
The gates just over the bridge. There.
So the southwest corner.
Almost by the southwest corner of the yellow.
That's your gate, is it?
That's the gate that's
Okay, right. That's right.
That's covered. Reinforced roads of pedestrians still. It's not sorry to access.
Sorry, please can you use your microphones? Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, so that stops with vehicle access to them 3 properties, but doesn't stop pedestrian. And then so our gate for our property is just there.
So you're looking at the northern
Yeah,
band,
north.
the northern yellow line?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're quite, how far apart?
No, they're around about 20 metres.
20 metres
Yeah.
between those two.
That's what I mean. Crossing that gate will not stop it doesn't really add an. And yeah, yeah. That's what that was.
Are you happy with that? And then that have you got it in your
Yeah.
So the southwest boundary, I'm just showing, this is page 37, the southwest corner boundary is where the communal, the gate for the 3 properties is that right, Mr. Scrutton, would you say?
Not quite, well, possibly. So there's the 3 what I refer to as plots of land. So there's the equine bit at the end. There's the land adjacent to the land we're talking about now, and then there's the field that Shane and Tracy own. A track then comes up from there to my house at the top, so that shared bit at the bottom isn't a shared area of my house, if that's what you're
So you're down here somewhere, right down the bottom,
sort of further off the page, I think.
so down further down than that. Yeah, it's more than 100 meters away.
I would say something, yeah, roughly that, yeah.
About 100, 150 metres, yeah,
Yeah.
up the hill.
So Mr. Scrutton.
It's hard to see on that map, to be fair.
All right.
It's a public right of way, but is it a bridle way or is it just a
So
footpath?
it's actually part of a pilgrim's trail that goes from Winchester to.
Yeah,
Cornwall.
is
It's
it
a
a
public
bridle way
right-of-way,
or
yeah.
is it a public
It's a bridleway, isn't it?
or an unmetalled road?
Sorry?
Or is there an unmetalled road if there's people going up and down in vehicles?
So it's a private road,
Okay.
yeah,
Fine.
but it's
Yeah.
also a public footpath bridleway.
Private road / public footpath.
And who maintains it? Do you maintain?
We do.
Oh,
Yeah.
right, okay.
Okay. That's fine.
There's 4 of us responsible for maintaining the
Right.
lower bit. The upper bit of the lane, which your house sits on, you're one of the responsibles for maintaining that. There's 20 of us, I think, altogether for that. But a higher proportion of the other ones are at the top of the lane, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right.
That's fine.
So Chairman, is there any signage then? So to deter vehicles coming through, does it say
Well, there's
No public access.
there's no signage off Botley Road to deter anyone coming down that lane for any purpose at all. So somebody could drive down to anywhere around there to the commercial units and get to the wrong address. They could come to the bungalow and get to the wrong address. There's nothing at the moment to tell anyone that it's a private lane, to my knowledge anyway. I've noticed that.
No, I don't think there is.
so that might be an option potentially?
Yeah, we'd be happy to put
Yeah.
signage up to say, you know, no
No public
vehicular
access to, or no vehicle access
Yeah.
to, yeah.
Yeah, we'd be happy with that.
Okay.
Sorry, just to clarify, whether it's used as a bridleway or not, do you have any horse riders using the Pilgrim's Trail?
I've never seen any horses come past, so I don't know whether it is a bridleway or not, but I haven't seen horses come past. Apart from the ones from the equine place, because they sometimes walk their horses out
Yeah.
onto the lane, back round and, but no, I think it's a public footpath.
Okay.
Chair, would you mind if I ask a couple of questions which
No,
might
please
help the
do.
committee? I just wondered in terms of advertising, do you have your own website and are you planning to do any form of advertising, and if so, what that might be?
No, we haven't got a website. I don't really think I would be bothered with a website. I mean, I've had previous websites with another business and I'm really not. I think it's more a kind of thing where we would potentially use social media or something like that. We have got a social media page. The social media page, if we won't really advertise as such because we're just looking to really collect the people that already come past. It's not something that but if we did do an event, it would clearly say it's a walk-through venue only. Everything we ever do, we will absolutely make sure.
We would also make sure that we put on any Facebook post or anything like that where there is parking and how a map to get to and from the site, and you know the best routes and walking routes.
Thank you. And I think that's something that perhaps aids the committee in terms of events, etc. Is that you would need to make sure that if you do form of advertising, like I say, even if it's local advertising, a reminder that it is no vehicles and where the parking would be.
That's fine.
And I've just done a Google search. It says the Pilgrim's Trail is a bridle way, so it's open for walking, horse riding, and bicycles. But that's
Yeah.
just a. But that's just the Pilgrim's.
Yeah. Yeah.
On the bridle path from the Priory down, there's a swinging gate that probably would stop a horse.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't get a view. Yeah, no. It might be a bridle path, but we're going off topic.
Just to say, earlier in the hearing, there was talk of the sat nav. My laptop has run out of battery, but I did have a look in terms of directions to the site, and it would take you up the lane from Botley Road, but then shows that then there's a walking part at the end.
Yeah.
On the street view, I didn't manage to check the age of it, but it doesn't show any doesn't appear to have any signage at all on that lane. There's no road name, there's no signage for any property. There doesn't appear to be any signage at all, but that's only based on what I can see on Street View at the moment, if that helps.
Okay. Thank you.
I think one thing I just want to make clear also is mention of the gate, and we should not be imposing conditions that are outside of the applicant or licence holder's control.
Yeah.
So if you have a gate where there are other properties that have control over that, that's not a reasonable condition, because if somebody else were to leave that gate open, that invalidates their licence, and that wouldn't be acceptable.
No, that's fine. We want to be fair.
Yeah.
Right. Can we adjourn with our legal advisor just to run through a few things first? Thank you. So we finish talking. Okay, thank you, Claire. We've had our discussion amongst ourselves and we would like to propose some conditions on this. If Laura would like to run through those.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just stress this is obviously without prejudice to any decision that members might make, and it's just in the interest of fairness and openness, so that you and the interested parties, the applicant, the interested parties, can see what members are considering. So, in terms of any opening hours, for reasons of public safety, and this is part of the legal advice which I'm obliged to give in open session. Any legal advice given in a session during which the parties are excluded, I'm obliged to tell you, and that's in the interest of fairness and openness, transparency. In terms of public safety, because there's no proposal for any lighting to be on the premises, the suggestion that the premises close at dusk or 9 p.m. or the earliest of whichever is the earliest of the two, by reasons of public safety. Only cider to be sold and consumed in tasting tasting quantities of a third of a pint and below an 8% ABV, so the alcohol level. And as offered, I think, by the applicants, maximum attendance at any one time not to exceed 100 persons, including staff, and any events of such nature, events that you wish to hold will not exceed 4 per annum. And signage on the premises nearest to the gate on the licensed site of the licensed area on the applicant's land to say that no vehicular access is possible to the site by the public, and the wording is something that's going to have to be considered, and signage directing the public to the nearest car parks. So those are the kind of the four main, in addition to the conditions that have been offered in the operating schedule and obviously the mandatory conditions. And members would just like to know what you might want a little bit of time to discuss that. This is what they'd be considering. So you can have.
I can understand it, to give some sort of conditions, and we're absolutely not opposed to any conditions like that. I mean, like you say about the dusk, well, you're looking at the lighting issues and the safety of people walking around the path. At the end of the day, I don't think that really would affect us particularly at all in what we're thinking of. The signage issue, I didn't quite get where we were talking, because don't forget, we can only put stuff on our land.
Yes.
And I know that signage on other people's land or other people have asked for signage to direct down to for example, the equestrian, because vehicles were going past and down into the commercial area, and that was refused by the person who owns.
Yeah.
So I mean, we can put whatever you want on our gates, but yeah.
I suppose you could say something along the lines of patrons are reminded that this is a walk-in site, something like that. Perhaps.
Yeah. Please do not attempt to come down in a vehicle. Yeah. I mean, that's not. And if you wish to purchase cider to take away, we're more than happy to deliver. Anything. It doesn't matter to us. That makes no odds whatsoever. I mean, limiting events to 100, I don't think we want any more than that. I mean, if we did want anything outside of that and there was a reason, more than happy to put in a temporary events notice. But I don't foresee that being anything that we really want to be doing with, because I've worked in I've worked in the fire safety industry. I've worked on events management plans, and I don't like doing it. It's painful. So it's not really something I'm interested in.
Just a reminder, up to 4 events per annum.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
What, I mean, there's the ciders and the strengths. I mean, cider goes up to 8.5 before it turns into a wine.
Yeah.
So 8% seems a bit of a strange cut-off point when cider is actually classified up to 8.5. So,
Oh, well, I get 8.5.
yeah, I mean that's although we aren't intending really making that kind of cider, it's just the fact that they're the cut-off points that are in HMRC's bracket, so it just ties in with that.
Well, if that's the maximum members, you might want to.
Well, I mean, a third of a pint of 8.5. I mean, third of a pint. I mean, is it restricting everything to 1/3 of a pint? But nobody could come down and buy a pint of.
In terms of taste, the tasting limit, the tasting.
If you've got like 4 varieties.
Yes, the idea. A tasting flight.
Yeah.
A flight. Yeah. No, I get that. We wouldn't serve a tasting flight in pint glasses or half pint glasses now. Yeah. That wouldn't be the intention at all to do that, because a tasting flight is a tasting flight anyway, and that's how they're done. It looks right served like that as well. It doesn't look right if you're trying to serve it in pints. Yeah. So more than happy with that.
I think we just need clarity. If that is likely to be a condition, that needs to be worded clear for any party to be able to read that, and that includes people that aren't here today. It's a public document, so conditions need to be really clear that if it's a tasting flight, that's separate to just being able to then buy a pint of X.
So the way we would see it is a tasting flight of 3 different ciders at 1/3 of a pint of cider each, or a half or a pint glass of cider.
I think the point is, members, that so it could only be cider if it was up to 8.5. So it's whether it's in your mind whether you wanted a less potent cider or not. That was the.
You worried about that?
No.
So the proposal now is that members will now. I will now go with members into their and only the Democratic Service Officer for them to formulate their views, and the proposal is that they return and give a summary of the reasons for the decision, and then that won't be the full reasoned decision, that will be the written decision that will follow, and that will be up to 5 days later, but hopefully it'll be before that, much way before that. So because it's just the time to write carefully worded conditions, as the licensing manager has said, it's got to be correctly worded so that it's clear and enforceable. So that's the proposal then.
Can I just interrupt with for the event capacity? Could that be staff and entertainment? So it's
I think we said not to exceed 100, including staff.
staff and entertainment. So if you've
And
they might count as staff, you might count as.
Just to clarify, but what are we classing? Because obviously we're saying 4 events a year. When does it class as an event? Because obviously we're only really expecting 8, say between 5 and 8 people tops. When do we go, right, okay, well now there's so many people when it's an event, when does it class as an event?
in advertised
If we're actually advertising.
event.
Yeah.
Yeah. But thank you for that.
Reference to dusk. I don't know if Laura's got experience of this in other areas, but I'm not particularly, that's not particularly enforceable from our perspective in terms of a time is definitive. Dusk is, I think that's difficult. Also, that's subject to interpretation, whereas if you put a defined number, then it's very clear. So I'd be concerned about using the word dusk in a condition, because that my other concern is also then if you're limiting it because of then people walking, if you've got people that walk particularly slowly, then by the time they then actually leave the premises, and then halfway down the track, is it then going to become dark? And
where do we Because at the end of
It
the day,
makes
we
it very
don't wanna-
difficult to enforce and
Yeah.
to be clear for the licence holders if their
Yeah,
licence is
exactly. We don't want to
granted.
be in a situation where there's a
Absolutely.
grey area.
And then,
No.
you know, Mr Scrutton or somebody else might see it in a different way. So I
We did
don't feel that's particularly clear.
consider that, but it's by reason of the fact that there's no lighting.
Well, what if we said sunset, because that's a defined time?
But
I think the other option is that you consider certain months of the year and set a time, and that's something for the applicant and for Mr Scrutton to comment on. That'd be the
I
other.
was literally just going to say, at the end of the day, we ourselves are not going to be down there at late anyway. So I don't think we really need to be limited on that, because we won't be down there. And know that it's not intended for us to work down there and be down there in nighttime hours, realistically. So I think, I don't know, I think it's very, if we're put in a grey area, I don't want to be in a situation where somebody's raising complaints that we're potentially going to be have a licence revoked on for a difference of opinion. I don't want to be myself. I don't want to be in that situation.
The only way around that is to limit the months of the year. So
Are you likely to have
Mm.
events in the winter months?
It is
when it's dark?
potential, because, well,
Would you then put lighting for the event at
yeah,
your site?
exactly, yeah.
So that's something perhaps to consider.
But then a winter event would more likely be in the daytime as opposed to the night anyway. But what I'm saying is, if you take it and limit the months, that rules out December or November, or so we would generally be in the daytime. If we did do anything, we probably wouldn't be doing anything into the evening. I'm not
Sorry.
interested again.
When I said limiting the months, I didn't mean the limiting the months of use. I meant the timings. So during X months of the year, it would be 4 p.m, 6 p.m, and then in the certain months it'd be, I don't know. That's for
Can we
Perhaps
be
put-
very precise on this and just go month by month, a different time for each month? I mean,
Yeah. What was sunset?
I mean, you could do, but I think that does make it difficult in that you've got 12 months in the year and you want it to be as clear as possible in terms of, you know, when the license to have then 12 sets of finishing times is not ideal.
I mean, our thoughts were that we wanted to limit it so that people didn't have to walk back down the dark track when it's dark. That was the primary consideration, and we have to define it some way. And sunset seemed to be a reasonable way of.
Yeah, I understand the reasoning. It's the enforceability and
Yeah,
being clear
No,
for every party
that's what
to
we
understand.
understand.
what the-
Carol said.
As much as I do understand that, I could, and I'm sure that everyone else could, think of quite a lot of licensed premises where you can only get to them down a public lane, so not which is actually a highway, and they actually walk down the road and they get on and off of a grass verge, and they limit their hours are 11 till 11.
You take the
And there is
Hampshire Bowman,
the Hampshire Bowman for sure is a single track lane, and you literally have to climb on the verge. And people walk down there with their own torches on their own phones. Or
Oh, yeah.
it's more because you were not providing lighting on the
But there's no
on the
lighting.
site. So obviously we don't want patrons stumbling around in the dark.
But there's no
out.
lighting all the way back into Bishop's Waltham down the
No,
lane.
I'm just talking about the licensed premises. We can't control anything beyond that. It's up to patrons how they, I mean, any
But
village.
the licensed premises stops at our gate.
Yeah.
The licensed
Yeah,
premises.
yeah,
actually
within your
So
license.
if we were to
area.
say, if it was dark and we put a lantern out, would that solve everyone's issue?
Well,
No,
that's what we
What
were
we were
saying
concerned
about
about is
lighting.
that you're talking about a very a lane rather than a road. So therefore, there's more opportunity for somebody to run into a problem because it's far lonelier. That's the theory behind it.
I think we've got to be careful, members, into straying into what's beyond the
Well,
applicant's control. And it's only because of, I think this started because of the lack of lighting on the intended licensed site. you know, that you're not going to put any.
Well, we could happily put lighting on the site. If we're just talking in the bounds, we could quite.
But lighting comes under planning.
Exactly, it does. I know that, and that's what I'm saying is I understand that you've got these crossovers and other areas where we might need to discuss other things with other people.
Yeah.
Outside of this, and yeah, I get that. I do understand where you've got that. I thought we were talking about people walking up the lane. You know what I mean? That was what I was thinking. I was thinking, don't really have much control over that, but I get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
With that.
If you're already planning to put in CCTV as part of that system, it would be motion detection.
We've got
Light would come on if people walk.
We've got a CCTV camera already up there. There's already one installed. It's already installed.
with a light that comes on.
And the light comes on when people approach.
Yeah, when it detects you, the light comes on. Yeah,
And that's actually in the
courtyard.
The courtyard. So if somebody walks across the courtyard to the toilet, the light will come on.
Like you would light their way, would
Yeah.
it? Okay. Okay, that's interesting. That's something for members.
Sorry, I think we, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain conditions that can be considered in relation to specific lighting needs for CCTV. It's whether that drives the lighting or the lighting drives the CCTV. I'm not quite sure, but you're saying the lighting is generated by the CCTV.
Can I ask a quick question? And you say that at dusk, you'll basically won't be running the business anyway. You'll be closed at dusk. So at dusk, will the building be unlit? Because if a building is unlit and people are walking down the lane, they're assuming it'll be shut. Whereas if the building is lit up at night, they'll assume it's open and they'll approach you. So will the building be dark after dusk?
So yeah, if we're not there, there won't be lights on unless. So the light that there's at the moment is on a motion detector camera.
Yeah.
So obviously, unless the gates will be shut, no one can go on. So therefore, in theory, no one should trigger the camera, which will turn the light on. So we will be dark when we're not there.
Yeah, and when it's dark, people assume it's not open for business, so they're not going to make their way to your premises anyway.
No,
Well, they'd have had to have set off from somewhere else anyway. So yeah.
So you envisioning 9 o'clock in the winter is someone who's come in at 4 and is still there at 9, and then you're closing at 9. Is that in your minds how you're envisaging it'll work?
I don't think we're going to be sat there serving somebody from 4 till 9. Realistically, it's if we've got one person turning up and they're there from 4 till 9, we won't be open. We'll just close. It's as simple as that. And I mean, I think you'll already find many premises around here, particularly Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays during the week. There's a lot of pubs that got licenses till 11, but they're shut at 8. And they've shut at 8 purely because they're shut at 8 because it's not worth them being open. We're quite the same in that way, that we're not going to sit there and wait for people to come until 9 o'clock. But at the same time, we don't want our license restricted to stop us being able to cover that off at different times of the year. So we will naturally not really be open anyway. But I think from what you were saying before, we need those defined boundaries, because then we can operate within those boundaries. And, you know, yeah, that's really what
I think, members, the only way that can be controlled is as has been suggested, that for the months of October through to March, the premises would have to be limited to before 9 p.m. For that reason, it's just getting that clarity I mean, obviously, if somebody walks through into the licensed area, whether they're going to be picked up on, the lighting will pick them up sufficiently to light their way through the entire area. I think that's something that
it's a very small license area. It's a very, very small. The boundary of that is very small, sort of patio area. It's probably not much bigger than this table. So
it's not because of restricting it's purely because of public safety. So
would it be possible for it to be 9 p.m. during British summertime and 6 p.m. during Greenwich Mean Time, during the other half of the year.
Yeah, because that's prescriptive and it's clear for everybody, that could be used, yes.
Daylight saving hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doable.
No?
Well, it's doable and it's defined, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
doable and it's defined. I don't see any reason why we would turn around and say no, because
It works.
it's logical.
Harold?
And it's just to say, you mentioned earlier that there's the use of temporary event notices. So if you do happen to then have,
You can bring
An
a
event,
temporary event.
yeah.
then you can use that, which is separate to the premises license.
Or apply to vary the licence, if you wanted, longer. You change it, obviously, you've got your planning considerations as well to consider further down the line.
Yeah.
That's always possible further down the line.
Yeah.
Yeah, what you're saying is we could make a reapplication to change anything if things did change, yeah. Because we don't know with regards to planning at the moment, that's all a bit,
Well,
I mean, to be honest, we haven't taken the planning issue any further at the moment because we didn't know where we were going with all of this.
well, that's why I wanted to make sure that everybody understands that licensing is variable
Yes,
and planning is defined.
yes,
And once you've got the planning that's set in stone. So,
yeah, no.
yeah, I think that's a sensible arrangement. If you're happy with that.
Chair, I think as we discussed, that we'd adjourn the meeting now for you to make your
Yeah.
decision. And I look at the time, and then announce that in a summary form, and then be followed by full written decision.
Yeah.
So if you want to retire back to the,
Sorry, Chair. In reference to the limited number of events, if that is to be conditioned, it's useful for enforcement purposes and for the license holder that's recorded by the
Yeah.
license holder. So they would record what the event was, the dates, how many people, well,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. Just so that then if there is any future requests from local residents or a question of us as officers, obviously we wouldn't be expected to know. So if that is likely to be a condition, if that's required, that then you make a record of what your events are, so that then if we need to approach you to ask any questions, you've got it then documented.
Yeah, because I was just really sort of like what was going on in my head then when you've just said that is, are we limiting events or temporary events? And you know what I mean? Obviously,
No,
you've got
this
the
is
events and
Temporary events are a separate item.
Yeah, okay, that's
I think that's
I
the
see
way
what-
we read that. Okay. Yeah.
Recording again, Chair.
Right, thank you. Subcommittee's come to its conclusion and our legal officer will read out.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to make clear that this is a summary of the decision of the licensing subcommittee today, and that the full decision, written decision, will be provided within the next 5 days. And it will be amplified. So this is, as I say, this is a summary, which I will read out and hand back to the chair. So the subcommittee consider this application for the grant of a premises licence to allow for the sale of alcohol on and off premises between the hours of 9 AM and 9 PM Monday to Fridays. The application is approved with conditions and reduced hours. The subcommittee heard from the applicant and local residents. A local resident, namely Mr. Scrutton. He stated he was speaking on behalf of another resident, which is to be confirmed, the name of that person. There were 4 written representations considered by members in the agenda. All concerned likely noise, the location of the premises, numbers attending, the use of private lanes and footpaths leading to the premises, and the lack of suitability for vehicles. The subcommittee noted the applicant was still in discussion with the local planning authority over planning consent in respect of the licensed area. It was noted that the premises will not be illuminated other than by motion sensors and CCTV. In reaching the decision, the subcommittee carefully considered the application, the representations made by the local resident and written representations by others, and the applicant's evidence given today, assisted by his son-in-law. To take into account the Council's statement of licensing policy, the public sector equality duty, the Home Office guidance issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003, the duties under the Crime Disorder Act of 1998, and the rights set out in the Human Rights Act. The subcommittee considered that the licensing objectives of the prevention of crime disorder, in particular antisocial behaviour, the prevention of public nuisance and public safety, were engaged. The subcommittee considered the guidance. In the guidance, there is no definition of public nuisance under the Act, and it should be given its broad common law meaning. It could include the reduction of the living and working amenity and environment of other persons living in the area of the premises. The subcommittee had regard to all these matters and sought to achieve an appropriate balance between the hours sought and the likely impact on those living and working in the area, it being predominantly countryside. The committee considered the evidence given and concerns raised about the application could be met by additionally appropriately worded conditions, and that with these in place, the licensing objectives would be promoted together with the conditions offered by the applicant, the mandatory conditions, and those overlapped with those in the licensing officer's report. The subcommittee considered that conditions need to be proportionate and appropriate. In regard to the reduction of our supply of alcohol, this was discussed at the hearing with the parties contributing their views on the proposals that members had considered without prejudice to their decision when they retired, in the light of promoting public safety at the premises, possible nuisance and crime and disorder. So the committee has decided additional conditions for the month during British summertime. The opening hours are 9 AM to 9 PM, and for Greenwich Mean Time, the hours of 9 AM to 6 PM. The sale and supply of alcohol is limited to cider below 8.5% ABV and alcohol sold. Alcohol sold and served should be limited to cider only. The application is concerned with a small-scale cider enterprise, and this reflects the aspirations of the applicants at this time in this new venture, and it being a walk-to only venture. The maximum attendance at any one time shall not exceed 100 persons, including staff and any entertainment personnel. There shall be held up to a maximum of 4 advertised events per year. The dates of the events held and numbers shall be retained for purposes of inspection at all times by the licensing authority and any other responsible authority. There shall be signage erected on the premises near to the entrances, reminding patrons that there is no vehicular access to the licensed site and directing them to the nearest car parks. These potential conditions and their wording were discussed at the hearing with the parties in order to agree a consensus. The committee has concluded that the premises licence should be granted with these additional conditions and those set out in the officer's report and those as offered by the applicant. But the parties will be formally notified of the decision in writing, and this will include details of the right to appeal against this decision to the Magistrates' Court, which must be made within 21 days of the notification. Okay, over to you, Chairman. Thank you.
Well done for listening properly.
Yeah.
Right, that's the close of this meeting.
Yeah.